September 29th. We are, well, we're heading into the fourth quarter in 2 days. All right, this is it. It's all downhill from here to end of the year. So hopefully you guys have got business set up and doing things necessary to have a really good fourth quarter and set up your first quarter of 2026. Really important to stay focused on what you need to do and what you're doing right now. We're going to talk about some things to help uh, maybe focus on some new areas in which to market yourself and capture some new business. And thanks to Dagmara, she asked me a couple of days ago. She's like, "Hey, have you heard of the lock-in effect?" And I'm like, "No." I'm like, "That's a term I haven't heard." And so she sent me an article about it, and so I was like, "Okay, yeah." So this is, she suggested it was a good topic to talk about, and I agreed. And so what I've done is I've prepared a presentation here to talk about the lock-in effect. And basically, what is the lock-in effect? The lock-in effect is homeowners with ultra low mortgage rates, okay? The 2 to 4% mortgage rates, and they're reluctant to sell because interest rates are so much higher. Just think about it. If you got locked in at a 2 to 4% mortgage rate, it's like, okay, maybe we've outgrown this house, but the thought of selling that and moving into something else where we're somewhere between 6 and 7%, that would be a big deterrent. I think, and I believe that it is for most people. So, which then that you know creates a dilemma where we don't have a big inventory, and when we don't have a big inventory, the demand hasn't gone up because, well, prices are so high and interest rates are high. So we're seeing supply increase, but we're not seeing the demand increase. And so what's happening is that for a long time, buyers had few choices, right? So that created an upward price pressure, and more compromises on the buyer. And then, for the sellers, it was less competition, so gave them more pricing power. But they face the same lock-in when they become buyers. So if somebody wants to sell for whatever reason, but they want to also buy something new, they're going to be facing the same dilemma as any other buyer right now. And while we are seeing an uptick in inventory, if you take a close look at the inventory, it's not, the nicer homes that come on the market, the ones that are more turnkey, those are selling pretty quick. But you look at what's left, and it's just like, the homes need a lot of work. And when the market was really strong, the homes that needed a lot of work, they were coming on and going right off the market because there was such a high demand that people were buying them up regardless. So why does it matter now? Where are we at? And this article came out last, I think it was May of 25. So, it's almost about 5 months away. And we're seeing the same thing is in existence now as it was 5 months ago, right? So this isn't a problem that's just going to go away real easily. And the answer isn't to bring back 3% interest rates, because that's just going to create more problems. Can you see how having low interest rates for such a long period of time, that was like historically low, all right, it's created this effect so that it makes the market unbearable. It's just that it's like, how do we find our way out of this market? Well, I think that overall, yes, the market will turn around. It's going to correct itself. It's going to continue to evolve, and we'll see where it goes when it goes there. But think about this: when you've got the amount of homeowners that are 6% or less in interest rate. Okay, how much do you believe, or what do you think the percentage is of homeowners that are at a 6% mortgage or less? Anybody want to take a stab at that?
maybe 40%, 50%.
Yeah, that's what I would have guessed, like 50%.
80 to 90% of homeowners
Wow.
are
Oh,
under
well, the
6%.
smart ones refinanced.
Yeah.
Good for them.
Yeah. So I was kind of hoping that Brian would be on here this morning too, so we can talk a little bit more about that. And what this does is it creates an artificial scarcity. Okay, less turnover keeps prices higher than many predicted, right? So usually when inventory is rising, we're seeing prices drop, and we are seeing some prices drop, but we're not seeing values drop. And it's just because the prices are dropping because the sellers are coming on too high in the market. If they're come on the market and they're showing their a good value, they're still going to sell reasonably quick. Okay, because there are still buyers out there. It doesn't matter what the market conditions are. It never does. People are still going to buy and sell. There's a lot of different reasons for that. We're going to dive into a little bit um, into that. But there's a buyer psychology where buyers hear rates are high, but don't understand why inventory is low. So what we've got to do is be able to explain that to buyers to help them understand. All right. So who's selling despite the lock-in? We still got sellers. In fact, we showed a property, a couple properties yesterday, and we've got there's we had one that was an investor owned, and we had one that was a young couple that are on their second child and or expecting their second child, and they're moving into a bigger home because their home was a 2 bedroom 1 bath, and so they've got to move, right? They don't have a choice. They bought this house. I don't remember, Val, how long ago they bought the house, but they're locked in at a good rate because they've owned it long enough, and now they're probably looking to go with a builder that is maybe offering more incentives and offering that buy down rate so that to get that interest rate down. So you got life events. Okay, whether it's divorce, whether it's getting married, whether it's a new baby, whether it's aging parents, people are going to move regardless of the rate. It's a life change that is just requiring this big change in their life. So um, so you've also got equity pressure where you've got homeowners that bought pre 2020 and have massive gains, and many want to cash out, right? So you'll have people that have all these gains and they want to cash out while they can. And they might be a little bit more flexible in their price because they've got all that equity, and they just, they want to sell, they want to cash out. Maybe they'll go rent for a while because, there's been a downtick in rent costs. So, as again, the demand kind of shrunk even for rentals. And so they're we're seeing we just talked to a couple property managers recently, and they were talking about, yeah, we've seen a slowdown in the demand for rentals, and so therefore we have seen some drops in rental prices. So that's something that you got to watch out for, and understand that these are the people that you might want to consider looking into. Another one is distress or debt, and this is an area where I'm focused on. Okay, because I've done this before, working with distressed properties, and so I feel like I'm really good at it. I have compassion for people. I know how to work with them. But these are people that are falling behind, whether it's falling behind on their credit cards, maybe they lost their job, maybe their adjustable HELOC is resetting, maybe they bought into an ARM, and the ARM is resetting, right? Because when interest rates started going up, we saw an increase in 5-year ARMs, and I can tell you that back when I first started buying homes, I was always in a 5-year ARM. It got me a better interest rate. And I just knew historically I'd never lived anywhere for more than 5 years. And so, I was always doing the 5 year adjustable arm. And so we've got people that are going to be resetting, and those are things you have to consider. Um, what kind of sellers are not locked in that maybe you can pursue? Well, what if they have an interest rate of 7% or more? Because for a while there, we had buyers that were getting in at 7 to 8%. And maybe they can't do a refi right now. Maybe they've got some issues with their debt or job or whatever, and they can't refi, but they keep sinking that ship where they're way behind. So they're you can look for and find people with mortgages that have 7% or higher. Sometimes they want to just get out because the payment's too heavy. Maybe they haven't fallen behind yet, but they're just feeling a strain of that monthly payment. And again, maybe can't refinance, or even, refinancing to what would be now maybe a 6 to 6.5% mortgage. Maybe that's just not enough to provide the relief that they need. So, um,
I was gonna say, like people who have total equity in their house, people who bought their house for cash, or have just tons of equity in their house will probably be another source.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's, and you can find that. You can find people that have the equity in their home and pursue them. And the higher interest rates, a strategy could be, would you like to see how we can get you into a home with a lower payment using today's builder incentives or buy downs, right? Because the builders are all offering incentives and buy downs. I mean, it's gotten pretty huge right now with what they're doing, and they're really not they're doing their best not to reduce prices, because reducing prices for kind of hurts them and hurts everybody, and they really don't want to do that, so they make it up with the incentives. And that's what a lot of other sellers need to do too, is look at, well, what kind of incentives can we offer the buyer? Well, maybe you got a seller and they can do it. It's like offer a buy down to a buyer. That would make it very interesting for a buyer to consider the home, because that's an added benefit. And not just a 2-1 buy down. You can get into the 30-year fixed buy down. Um, Cost you a little bit more, but at least then you're a little bit more secure, because a lot of people, think about it. A lot of people got into that 2-1 buy down, and now that, after their second year, they're going back up to whatever interest rate was, planned at that time, which could be, 6, 7%. And they could afford it when they got into it, but now they can't. So you want to, watch for that. Buyers that bought in the last 18 months. Okay. A lot of buyers that bought in the last 18 months might have buyer remorse. They realize they got in there and they're like, oh my God, what did I do? I that happened to me. I bought a house in 2006, and by the end of 2007, I'm just like, man, what the hell did I just do? It's like market slowing down, and I'm not making the money I was making when I bought the house, and so I started sweating it out, and things were getting tight. I bought the house, it was used. I got in, and then all of a sudden, the carpets were very clean when I did the walkthrough, but then as I'm living there, I'm walking around, and all these spots come up. Well, they were spots from the dog that used to live there. And so I'm not, wow, okay. So now I got to replace the carpeting. And you replace the carpeting, and I put hardwood floor, but it's like, well, now the place needs to be painted, and so I just got into this whole remodel. And so I had great credit. So I'm just putting it on, store credit, and my credit cards and stuff, so I can just get this work done, get it done quickly. Well, and that created a lot more stress for me, because my income didn't increase for a couple more years. So, it's there's other people that are facing the same type of situation. So, position yourself as the exit strategy, right? We always talk about we're the problem solvers. You know, you want to help them be the exit strategy to help them strategize on getting out of that situation. Um, Another good category is the absentee owner and investor category. All right, they're facing rising insurance. Although I will say, I just got a insurance quote. My insurance went up tremendously, and I'm like, no, no, no. So I went and shopped it, and I got a rate from somebody else that is less than half of what my current insurance company was going to renew at, and it's less than I've paid. Um, Probably for the last 5, 6 years. Okay, each year it's gone up a little bit, and I do try to generally shop it each year. But I went to John Tankersley this year, and like, John, give me a quote, and I'm just like, holy cow, what a difference. So yeah, so you've got the rising insurances, right? If people aren't shopping, they're going to do it. But the tax rate, the property taxes, look, if you're an absentee owner or an investor, you don't have homestead. Having homestead caps you at 3% a year. So as taxes increase, your homestead keeps you much lower. But if taxes go up 10%, well, it's going to the investor or absentee owner, it's going up 10%. And we've seen that, right? Especially with the fast rise of values. Assessments have gone up tremendously. So now their ROI is shrinking, and they might be willing to consider selling. Um, you know, so your pitch to them could be sell now while rents are high and values are still strong. Because yeah, I mean, we could still see a tumbling of values. That I believe that is still yet to come. I'm hoping I'm wrong, but yeah, that's kind of what I expect to see. So another one is boomers downsizing. So think about this. Boomers that have been in their home for 20, 30 years, and kids are long grown, and they're like, yeah, I don't want to take care of this 3,000 square foot home, 5 bedrooms, and it's just me and you, and we should consider doing something smaller. They're not going to care as much about the rate, because they're going to look at everything they're paying to upkeep, the amount of work it is. Maybe they want to do more traveling, so they may want to shrink down to something lower maintenance. And in the long run, it will make up for itself. Or they've got so much equity in their house, they're going to downsize and just buy something else with cash. We're seeing a lot more cash buyers. They're talking about the amount of equity that the people in the United States have in their homes right now. It's just a tremendous dollar amount. And so they're using that equity to buy homes cash. And we've had several transactions this year with cash buyers. So, if it's a cash transaction, the mortgage rate just doesn't matter. So you might want to try to find more, sellers like that. So, yeah, expired listings are another great target for you. While we know that's low hanging fruit, and we've got people that are targeting them constantly anyway, they've already signaled that they want to sell. So that they're trying to sell and they want to do something. So they're a great uh, people to reach out to. So, vacant homes that are vacant, there definitely are, a number of homes, whether it's an absentee owner or, they're just sitting there vacant. And when a home sits there vacant, it seems to deteriorate a lot faster than a home that's actually being lived in and used. We talked about the distressed properties. You got to think about the pain that they're having. The pain is greater than the interest rate issue. Okay, sometimes they just need to get out. Sometimes they just need to sell and just like lay low for a year or two, go rent somewhere cheap and get back on your feet financially. Sometimes it's just a matter of, depending on how distressed they are and where they are. We've been working with some people that they've got a ton of equity, but they don't want to leave their house. They don't want to give up that low interest rate, but yet they're still far behind in their mortgage, and they don't understand that they're going to miss out, and they're going to end up losing, if not all, most of their equity because they're falling behind. Once you're behind in your mortgage, it's so tough to recover. It really is. And people need to understand that it's just not that simple to just recover. It's not that simple to just, try to fight it. It's not that simple to just, I've got one lady, she went and hired an attorney and this and that. I'm like, man, you're just throwing your money away. All an attorney's going to do is just delay the inevitable. And they can milk it out, but then that just makes for a bigger attorney fee. So, talking to divorce and probate attorneys are another great resource for finding people that need to sell. All right, and it's a great opportunity there. So you get in with these attorneys that they're probably going to have these clients that they can refer your way. You want to get in good with the builder reps as well, so that way you can easily call them if you're working with somebody and they show up at a builder's model without you, which happens quite a bit. You can at least call them up, and you know them, you've got rapport with them. You can say, look, I just, Mr. and Mrs. Smith came in this weekend. I didn't even know they were coming to town. They didn't call, but they didn't want to bother me. So I just want to make sure we got them registered to me. And most of the time it's not going to be a problem. Right. So, and so now how can you explain the lock-in effect in 30 seconds to a buyer or seller? Any idea how you can explain that to them? I've got some scripts, and I still haven't figured out how to put a document in the chat. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I think that'll be the best way to do this. Let me make sure I've got what I need here. Okay, yeah. What I'll do is I'll get this to you afterwards. There we go. Yeah. All right. Share my screen. All right. So here's some talking tracks and some scripts for you that I'll go ahead and send your way. So for sellers sitting on a 3% mortgage, your hook could be keeping 3% might be costing you 100% of your next chapter. All right. So you can make little videos that will help promote this, put on social media. If you could sell near peak pricing and keep payment shock in check using a 2-1 or permanent buy down funded by concessions or an assumable builder incentive, would you want the numbers? Okay, I'll run both. Stay versus sell and right size so you can choose, not guess. So you're giving them options, right? You're kind of stimulating their mind to have, be open to an idea here where, yeah, you might have you might be able to solve their problem. For buyers worried about interest rates, today's rate is your first rate, not your forever rate. I'm kind of iffy on that because it sounds like, date buy the house, date the rate, or whatever that saying was that didn't really work out. But at the same time, I mean, it's the first rate, it's not the forever rate. So they can do a refi down the road as interest rates improve. We don't know when that's going to be. It could be next year. But you can use seller funded buy downs or builder credits to lower 1-year payments and refinance when the window opens. So the real savings is buying the right house. Payments can change, neighborhoods don't. And that's something too. We were working with with our buyers yesterday. It's like the neighborhood that this one home is in. You can't change the location. The location is prime for what they want to do. But well, they're cash buyers anyway. But they're looking at whether or not the house needs more work than it is, and of course the price seems a bit high for what it is, but again they've put a premium on the location. The call to action would be, want 3 homes where you'd net a lower effective payment after credits. So this is where you got to get good at math, right, and have these things ready to go, where if they answer, yeah, let me, tell me about it. You've got to be able to jump on a call with them right away and be prepared to give them those scenarios. For move ups, trading payment for lifestyle. So what's the price of not moving? Extra commute, limited space, missed school zone. Let's cost that out. If lifestyle ROI beats the rate spread, you'll know it. If not, we pause. No pressure. Okay. So you can do this, and make different prompts, different things that you can do. Use a tractor. I'm sorry, wrong platform. That's my database. Use Chat GPT and put it in there and say, look, this is who I'm dealing with right now. What do you suggest would be the right words for me to use to help them understand that this would be a good time to do this. So, you got a real hook. Rates didn't freeze the market. Homeowners did. Here's how we unlock it in the Orlando Winter Garden area. You can do a carousel on Facebook and, slide 1, locked at 3%, question mark. Slide 2, 3 ways to move anyway. You got assumable loans, seller buy downs, new builder incentives. And then you got an email subject line, your 3% loan is golden handcuffs. Here's the key. I like that one because, and you can modify that. You can easily look up and see what kind of mortgage somebody has, if they've got a 3% or if they got a 4%. I mean, you put that in there. So it resonates with them that, oh, what percentage they're at. Okay. For sellers at 3%, keeping your low rate may feel safe, but what's it costing you in lifestyle or opportunity? I can run a stay versus move side by side so you can decide with numbers, not fear. I like that. It's always the fear that blocks people, right? It's the fear of missing out. It's the fear of I don't want to pay higher interest rates. It's the fear of just not knowing. People tend to fear change and what it's going to bring. They like to stay in their comfort zone. So for buyers, today's rate is your first rate, not your forever rate. We can use a buy down or build a credit to lower your initial payment and refinance later. Okay. Here's a 45 seconds script that you can do. And look, videos are, you got to be doing these videos. So have you heard of the lock-in effect? It's why so many homeowners aren't selling right now. They're sitting on mortgage rates as low as 2 or 3%, and they don't want to trade that for today's higher rates. The problem? This keeps inventory tight, drives up prices, and leaves buyers frustrated. But here's the truth. There are options. Assumable loans, seller-funded buy-downs, and builder incentives that can soften the blow and actually make moving possible. So if you're wondering, am I stuck? The answer is no. Shoot me a message and I'll run the numbers so you can see the real choices on the table. Now, here's one for people that have a 7% or higher mortgage. Okay, I noticed you bought recently and your mortgage is probably closer to today's higher rates. If your payments feel heavy, let's run numbers on a move that could actually reduce your monthly cost with builder incentives or seller buy downs. You have to have a ton of equity. You've built equity fast, even in the last couple of years. If payments feel tight, we can explore a move that unlocks your equity without locking you into stress. And then scripts for distressed sellers like enlist pendants. Hi, I know this is a stressful time. Many homeowners in your situation don't realize they actually have options, especially if you still have equity. The bank's timeline isn't the same as your timeline, and you may be able to sell quickly, avoid foreclosure on your record, and even walk away with money in hand. Would you like me to show you what that could look like? Equity protection script. You've worked hard to build equity in your home. If foreclosure goes through, you could lose that equity completely. Selling now could help you protect what you've earned, pay off the mortgage, and still put cash in your pocket. Would you like me to run the numbers so you can see exactly what's at stake? Okay. Another one is you're not alone. Thousands of homeowners in Florida are in the same situation right now. It's not about failure, it's about taking control before the bank does. I help you look at options like a quick sale, investor offers, or even negotiating more time. Would you like me to walk you through these choices so you don't guess? So you get where I'm going with this? These are the scripts I'll send to you. All right, I'll send them off in an email here in a few minutes, and that way you'll get them directly. And but it takes practicing the scripts like that. It takes doing those videos, all right, to where you'll start creating some attention for yourselves online, because people are going to see your post, and you don't know how many people actually scroll. They see your post, but they didn't put a like on it or whatever, and so you don't really know how many people, but people are still seeing your stuff. And so if you have a good hook, you have a good capture, something there, a good image that stops them from scrolling, they're going to take the time to read. But the idea is to keep the text short and sweet. The same thing with your emails. Okay, having that good subject line is the key to them opening that email, and then keeping that email short and sweet is what you want to do, because if it's too long, too much text, people are not going to read it. So you want to be able to go after that. So you've got a lot of options here of people that you can go after in order to capture a piece of the market, what's going on right now, because still buyers are buying, sellers are selling, and people have to move. People still want to move. I know people that want to move, and yet the interest rate doesn't phase them out. It's just like, hey, I'm over being in this house or whatever. um it's there's a lot of different ways to be able to avoid getting trapped into the situation where people have all these excuses where they don't want to sell or buy. And then of course the interest rate thing is really key. And I get it. I get why people don't want to give up that rate. I think that it would be hard, if I was in that situation. I've got the house I've got across town is at 3.75. um but I can tell you, as soon as my daughter's ready to move out, that house is going on the market. Regardless of what the conditions are. It's just, I'm going to be ready to sell it and move on. So now what's also important with all this too is being able to have all the useful stats at your fingertips to be able to talk those numbers. Okay. Now, if your email's short enough, you can include a couple stats in there, right? People like stats. They like percentages. They want to know what averages are. So having something like that in the email is good, or even in your video script. It's just that those stats change quite a bit, and frequently. So but the idea is to be an educator. You want to educate the buyers and sellers, and help them understand that, yeah, there's options. There's options. You don't have to be deterred just because of interest rates being what they are. Because I really don't believe we'll see interest rates dropping back to 3. I really don't. And I hope not, because I think that that's just bad. Um, but I think we might see back into the 5s. But look, 6 is not a bad new normal either. So it's just that everything has to acclimate to it, and that takes time. That takes time because we were at so low for so long, and that's all people remember. They don't remember back when interest rates were 8%, and when they dropped to 6% over time, and it was like, wow, you better buy now because we've never seen interest rates this low, and they're not going to go any lower. And what happened? Well, they went lower. So all those people that bought back then, did their refis. And so all of those people were now at 3%. So yeah, it's been hard to give that up, over time. But we're at a place now where, there are opportunities out there. Okay. So you've got to kind of find your niche and work it. Don't try to cover all of these different areas that we talked about here today, but plug in the one, okay, and pursue it. That's why I said I'm plugged into the distressed properties. I just know, I was an expert in it before. I have compassion for people being in that situation, having been there myself before. And so, my idea and mine and Valerie's is that we just, at this stage in our life, we just want to be able to help people. And we want to work with people that want to work with us. So we're being a little bit more selective, and we can be. We can be. And I know that, others are not. You guys are much younger in your careers and life, and you got to think of a much longer future ahead of you. But we are, we're focusing on the distress so that we can help people, and we want to be their problem solvers and get them where they need to be. So even a couple of these scripts I've got, man, like, all right, I'm going to get these emails out, and I'm going to create a series of emails to these distressed properties that I've been reaching out to, and some that I've even talked to that don't want to give up their home. They don't want to give up that 3%, but yet they're months behind in their mortgage payment, and they don't have a resource to be able to get themselves out of that hole. Yeah, and I've got a retired couple. The wife's still working a job, but they've been in the house for 20 years, and they just, the house is in disrepair. They lived there 20 years and they haven't done anything, and yet they had two really nice brand new looking Mercedes in their garage, and I didn't have the heart to tell them, sell you two cars, you know, get, but people don't know how to help themselves sometimes. They don't know how to get out of their own way to be able to, find that light at the end of the tunnel. And so, we need to have that compassion. We can't just go tell them, go sell your cars, right? That's not going to grab their attention. That's just going to piss them off, and they're not going to want to work with you. So you've got to be understanding and just find a way to get through to them. And that is usually by giving them the facts, giving them statistics, finding the right words to help people understand. And so that takes time. And that's, again, an area you can use ChatGPT, and give it a good prompt saying, look, how do I make this seller, after you've given the description of the seller and what the situation, how do I help this seller to understand, that time is of the essence here, and they need to do something sooner rather than later, and I'm providing them with solutions, and it will give you some good scripts to go on. Okay. But the key is you got to practice those scripts. It's because it's got to come out authentically. It's got to come out in your words, using those words, but coming out as if it's you saying it, not as you, practice, reading a script that you've practiced. Does that make sense? So, questions on this? Comments? Does it make sense? Thanks again, Dagmar, for the concept. This was good. I think it's still going on, and will be for a while. We're going to be facing this.
Yeah, I read somewhere that since the lock-in effect took place recently, there has been over $80.1 billion in lost transactions in the US, and they're not delayed, they are just lost. I was
Mm.
like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's look, well, anytime the government gets involved in things, things are going to get messed up. They think they're doing the right thing, and they don't think about the repercussions of what they're doing down the road. They're looking for that instant gratification. How do I get reelected on the next election? And yeah, so this is going to help people right now. And I mean, look at the debt we're carrying. They keep doing this stuff, spending our money, and yet now we're in so far in debt that it's going to take a really long time to recover from all that. So um, they're not looking to the future when it comes to how they're spending. And this is, a lot of people are doing the same thing. You know, you got the government setting the example. Well, let's just keep spending, even though we don't have the revenue to cover it all. We'll just put it on credit cards and debt, and that's where people that are buying a home, you know, generally what they're doing is they're maxing out what they can get approved for so they can get more home, right? Because they want bigger and they want better. And of course, they might go in with a budget, but then they get approved for a higher amount, and then they're buying a house that is, more expensive than they originally budgeted for or where they want it to be. And then all of a sudden they start feeling the pinch of that payment.
Not just the payment, but the ongoing costs of the house. I think it's the killer. It's not necessarily the purchase price for most people. It's the ongoing maintenance and cost of the home that end up being the demise.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because yeah, the cost of keeping up a home, and the bigger the home, the more the cost, the more work it takes. And I know some people are like, well, I just take care of that stuff myself. Well, at some point that does get old, and maybe you're no longer capable of doing that all yourself because you still got to work, you still got got to live a life, you got a family, and so, yeah, you find that, the weekends aren't long enough now to get all the household chores done. And then, then that starts getting depressing. And then you start getting upset, and then you start letting things go. And before you know it, you're thinking, well, maybe I'll sell. And your realtor comes in and says, well, okay, yeah, but you got some things here you should do before you put this on the market. So all that stuff now that you put off, it has to, should get done in order to maximize their return on the sale. So, so yeah, it's the pressure washing, it's the, everything that comes in with, with taking care of a home. So yeah, so these are some areas that you can definitely tap into, that will help you with your business and try to capture a bigger piece of that pie. Like I said, there's always opportunities out there. They change, and they present themselves. But if you're not prepared to recognize that, you miss those opportunities. If you're not willing to do the work to find those opportunities, you're going to miss those opportunities. But the opportunities are there. You just have to, pick a niche. Again, don't try to do it all. Just pick one that you really want to focus in on, and start putting the work in to develop that. Keep in mind, it doesn't happen overnight. We've been working distressed properties for a few months. We've had some conversations where we're still trying to get some things on paper with that, but it takes time to develop because you got all these people that they have to deal mentally with that giving up of their home.
Yeah, that's the big thing. You have to almost be a therapist because you have to watch for the change. You have to have a conversation with them, figure out what change they're dealing with or problem, and then you've got to find a way to solve their problem. So if you can do all those things, you'll have a sale. I mean, regardless of everything else, we just have to be problem solvers.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
all good.
Cindy, you put in the chat, an investor promoted a beautiful home for $35,000. The details were to take over their $350,000 mortgage and noted the terms. So, yeah, And that's another way to get out, right? You know, and I've seen people doing that, especially investors. Yeah, you know, they want to take over their mortgage. Now, that's where, you know, the subject to comes in as well. And that's what those buyers are looking to do. They want to give you some cash up front and just assume your loan. Well, actually, it's not even assume. That's wrong terminology. You got to watch your words. They're not assuming your loan. They're taking over the payments for that loan. And so, you know, so like this investor that, you know, put it up for sale for $35,000 and then take over the mortgage. I mean, if that's an assumable mortgage, then great. The sellers want it now. The sellers, what does that mean? The sellers want it now. They want to keep the house.
No, well, before all the investors were going after those type of scenarios.
Yeah.
Now the sellers are advertising those
Okay.
scenarios. It's the other way
Yeah.
around now. One quick
Yeah.
note, I remember when I had kids, that's why this kind of hit my heart. That I remember a story how this woman drives out to one of these locations where families can get, you know, free milk or whatever they need for their young children or supplies. And she had a Mercedes, and everyone looked up, you know, down on her. But in the end, she pretty much noted that she owed more on that Mercedes, and sometimes you're up and down in life, and that is why she had it, and that's why she needed the supplies. So sometimes judging people like that, that always, you know, hit me, and I remember that story.
Yeah. You know, and yeah, you shouldn't judge people by their, you know, how they look or appear or something like that. And I get that. Look, we work with this one couple that, oh my God, you know, they had this big, you know, I don't know, it was like $1,200 a month pickup truck payment. And, you know, it's hard not to look at people that way and say, what were you thinking? But the reality is that the average car payment in America now is like in the 900s a month. And I'm like, I mean, that's ridiculous. That is almost a mortgage payment. Well, in some cases, it is a mortgage payment. And you know, people do this to themselves. You know, they don't teach money management in school. And you know, it's the value place. So that's where I believe that you got to put money up at the top with your family, religion, or whatever else is up at the top for you. Value should also be up there as number one, value of money, because if there is something that you want so bad, it's going to put you into debt like that. That means you're placing value over that on that pickup truck more than the value of money. All right. And that's not good. That's how you get into trouble. You've got to have value for money and a love for money. Okay. Because then you will do what you need to do, whatever it takes to continue to live the lifestyle that you want, but do it comfortably. Whereas, you know, when you start buying things because you just want them, I really love that truck. Oh yeah, but I'm going to have a $1,200 a month payment. You have to step back and really think about that. Same with a home. You know, you really love that home, but oh man, it's really above our budget. Well, you got to rethink that. Do you love that home more than you love your money and what that money will do for you in your life? So, you know, so how you look at money really makes a big difference. And sometimes we can help buyers and sellers understand that, but look, they've already got their own perception. And we can't always change that. Dagmar, you got your hand up?
That's actually funny. I usually tell the buyers, if they get pre-approved for what will ultimately be way more than their actual monthly budget, I tell them, I say, you know, if you really love that house, remember, you also have to love that payment.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
you can't love one without the other. You need to make the mortgage payment to keep the house you love. So make sure you love both.
Absolutely. And that's a great reminder. And another reminder too is that, you know what? Yeah, you saw that the property taxes seem low on this property, you know, especially you're buying a house where somebody lived in it for 20 years and they've had homestead. yeah, your property taxes, once you purchase it, are going to go up. Even if you do file for homestead, the value is going to take a jump up. Your taxes are going to be higher. So you are going to have more in your monthly payment than just your mortgage payment. So hey, thanks for being here. Yeah, so we are at the top of the hour. Anybody else have any other questions or comments or any other discussion on this topic? All right. Well, we'll go ahead and call it for this week. Next week, we'll be into the fourth quarter. I do have a guest coming on next week. We're going to be talking about Facebook ads, and how to keep up with all the changes in that, and how you can use that um, to target and market yourself. So that's going to be a good one next week. I hope you all make it, and hopefully we'll get some others on as well. So, all right, guys, have a great day.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for the topic.
You got it. All right. Stop.